Hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here. My name is Robert Wetzel. My family owns Alexander Valley Vineyards, a winery in the Alexander Valley in Sonoma County. And I'm here to talk to you all about our winery and the wines that we make, several of the wines that we make, which I have here to try with you tonight. But first, I want to thank you all for being a part of the Zannato's Market dinners. Zannato's Market, I want to thank them as well because they have been big supporters of Alexander Valley Vineyards for many years, and we really appreciate everything that they do for us. So Alexander Valley Vineyards, a little background. Alexander Valley is a sub-region of Sonoma County. It's in the northern part of Sonoma County. And it's named after a man named Cyrus Alexander. Cyrus Alexander came to the Alexander Valley in the 1840s, settled there, and he kind of became the community leader, and eventually the valley was named after him. And where my family comes in is in 1962, my grandparents, Harry and Maggie Wetzel, purchased the original homestead of the Alexander family from Cyrus Alexander's granddaughters. And my grandfather had the idea that he would grow grapes there. Back in the early 60s, there really wasn't a lot of wineries in Sonoma County. There weren't a lot of vineyards. The Alexander family never grew grapes. They did not make wine. California wine just really had not become a thing at that time, the way it is now. But my grandfather thought that it would be a good region to grow grapes, and that's what he started to do in 1963. He planted his first grapes in 63. He started selling those grapes to other wineries in the area. There were not many, but they were not non-existent. Actually, Robert Mondavi was his very first grape customer. He began doing that, and eventually, my father, he was 9 years old when the property was purchased, and he'd grown up in Los Angeles and he'd spend summers up in the Alexander Valley, and he just really decided that he enjoyed that farming, rural lifestyle much more so than the urban life that he'd grown up in. So he wanted to learn how to make wine, and he ended up going to UC Davis and studied fermentation science. He met my mother at UC Davis, and the two of them soon after college were married, and they started the winery and named it Alexander Valley Vineyards. Back at that was 1975 was the very first vintage. And at that time, Alexander Valley was not an established, wasn't its own established AVA, which is an American viticultural area. That didn't come along until 1984. So we actually named the winery Alexander Valley Vineyards before the Alexander Valley AVA was established, which today results in sort of quite a bit of confusion because there are, I don't know, probably 30 wineries in the Alexander Valley. We just happen to be the one named Alexander Valley Vineyards. But that also, in a way, is good because it's a very well-recognized grape growing region, particularly for Cabernet Sauvignon, which we will try later, but also for a lot of varietals. We're actually growing, when we started, when the first grapes were planted, people didn't really know which grapes were going to do well in the area. So my grandfather first planted Cabernet Sauvignon, Chardonnay, a Riesling, and a Chenin Blanc. We don't grow Riesling or Chenin Blanc anymore. And in fact, I don't think anybody grows Riesling or Chenin Blanc in the Alexander Valley because those grapes really don't do that well there. However, the Bordeaux varietals and Chardonnay do very well. So we do grow a lot of those varietals, those being grapes like Merlot and Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, Petit Verdot, and Malbec. So yeah, the winery started in 75 and very small at the time, but my parents put a lot of work into growing distribution and growing the business. I was actually born in 1978, so the winery is a few years older than me. So I grew up right next to the winery, and basically spent my whole life involved with it in some way or the other. When I was younger, would do field work and worked harvest. And after college, I was hired as a salesperson and worked in LA for a while, and then moved to Chicago. Did Midwest sales in Chicago up to the point where I became the national sales director and now manage the sales team. We don't have a big sales team. There's 6 of us, but I manage them remotely out of Illinois. Things that are going on at the winery, one thing that I think makes us a little bit different than other wineries is that we are an estate winery. What that means is all of our wines, not every single one of them, most of them are estate grown and bottled. So all the production needs to occur on the estate, which includes things like bottling and barrel aging. So we actually started digging caves in 1997, and that's where we do all of our barrel aging. If you've ever been to the winery, if you haven't, I encourage you to go, but if you've ever been, we do daily tours of our caves at 12 and 2:30, and they're free of charge, complimentary cave tours. If you want to come check them out. We're actually in the process of digging new caves that started a couple months ago. It's going to take about 2 years, and we'll double the size of our cave to make it about 50,000 square feet, one of the largest wine caves in the country. But yeah, so please come and check us out. So the caves do two things. They allow us to be a state because we're barrel aging on the site, but they also help us with our sustainability. We are a certified sustainable winery, and we use certified sustainable grape growing practices. And because of the caves, there's no temperature control that needs to exist. The caves themselves will stay between 58 and 62 degrees year round. So if it's 30 degrees early in the morning in the winter or 100 degrees in the summer, the temperatures inside the caves are the same. And the temperature is a perfect temperature for barrel or for aging wine in barrels. So they serve a purpose. They serve multiple purposes. But enough of this background. Why don't we taste some wines? So I'm going to start. Hang on one second. I'm in my kitchen. But we'll start with some white wines. So the way this dinner was described to me is everyone has at least 2 of these bottles. So maybe you don't have them all, but I'm happy to talk about all of them. And I'll start with this one here, which is one of the few wines that we do not call a state, and is actually fruit from a different region. This is a Gewürztraminer. We just call it Gewürz because Gewürztraminer is a mouthful. It's hard to say, and Gewürz just makes it a little more simple. So these grapes actually come from Mendocino County. We used to grow Gewürztraminer grapes on our property, but like the Riesling and the Chenin Blanc, we learned quickly that the Alexander Valley is not the ideal region for growing Gewürztraminer. It requires a little bit cooler temperatures, and you can find those up in Mendocino County. So that's where we get the grapes from. The other thing that's interesting about this wine is it is organic fruit. I don't know if you can see it, but it does say on the back here, ingredients. It's organic Gewürztraminer grapes. One of 2 wines that we make from organic fruit. Gewürztraminer, I think, tends to be on the sweeter side, but with this wine here, if you taste it right now, you'll see, like when you smell the wine, it smells like it's going to be a sweeter wine, but then you taste it, and it's actually fairly dry. In fact, I think our Chardonnay might have even more residual sugar than our Gewürztraminer, and it's a dry Chardonnay. So this is a very dry style of Gewürztraminer. Really clean. We don't use any oak, so there's no barrel aging at all on this wine. It's always the very first wine that we release after each harvest. So I'm drinking the 2020 vintage. Are probably on the same vintage. We'll be releasing the 2021 before the year's over. The grapes are already picked. The wine's already fermented. We're using tanks, and it will be released. We try to get the wine out before Thanksgiving because it is a great wine to pair with the Thanksgiving dinner. It goes great with turkey. It also goes great with something if you're eating something with a little bit of spice to it. And it probably go very nicely with the soup that you guys that's on your menu tonight. So, fun wine. That's the Gewürz. And I move on to the Chardonnay. This is the Chardonnay, 2019 vintage. Hopefully you're on that vintage. It's our very first time that we've made this wine with a screw cap. It's historically always been a cork. 2019 was the very first vintage with the screw cap. This is our state label. So all of our wines that have this label are our state wines, and they do make up almost 90% of what we produce. So again, predominantly a state grown and bottled winery. Stylistically with this wine, it just reminds me, I didn't talk about the winemaker today. My father made wine for 25 years, and he hired somebody as his assistant in the late 90s. And that person very quickly took over as head winemaker, and his name is Kevin Hall. And he's been with us, I believe, this last harvest that just wrapped up last week was his 24th harvest. So he's been with us a long time. He's only the second winemaker we've ever had, and we basically consider him part of the family. He's doing a really fantastic job. And with the Chardonnays, he makes them in a style that is lightly oaked. So you're going to get, he ferments 30% of it in barrels and 70% of it in stainless steel. And the result is a very nicely balanced wine, where you do get a little bit of oak, but it doesn't overpower the wine. 70% of stainless steel fermentation allows you to, makes it a bit of a, more of a fruit forward style. It has really nice acidity on the finish. It's going to balance out that fruit really nicely and just balance. That's the word I would use to describe this. Oak, but not overpowering, and fruit that is not blanketed by oak. And that is actually it for the white wines. We are very much a red wine winery. Those are the only two whites we make. We do make a rosé out of Sangiovese. And this harvest that we just wrapped up, we picked some Sauvignon Blanc fruit. And we're going to be releasing that wine, our very first Sauvignon Blanc, right around the end of March of next year. Only 500 cases produced. We didn't make a lot of it. Probably something that would be hard to find unless you're at the winery. But I mean, it's an opportunity to come check out the cave and taste some Sauvignon Blanc. Now I'm going to move into the reds. And my featured bride is here, and she wants to try some wines too, since after 5 we're recording this. This is Elena.
Hey, everyone.
The first red that we're going to try. Oh, I'm sorry. Can we get in here? Come on.
You're the man about it.
Our Pinot Noir. So I'm drinking 2019, and it's very possible that you guys have the 2018 because we very recently sold through the 18 and moved on to the 2019. Pinot's a fruit or a grape that you're not going to find a lot of in the Alexander Valley. Alexander Valley is a little warm for Pinot Noir. However, where we're located is at the very southern part of the valley, and our property borders up along the Russian River. And so our Pinot grapes, we grow right along the Russian River. We first planted them in 1984. We've got one little 5-acre plot, which is really the only place on the property that we feel we can grow this grape. So we never make a lot of it. I would describe the wine as a medium-bodied Pinot. Pinot tends to be on the spectrum of red wines on the lighter side. Pinots are going to be very light. I would argue that this is, as far as Pinots go, a bigger style. It's far from being a huge wine, but as far as Pinots go, I would describe it as being pretty rich. Got a nice dark cherry to the right. And it's a fun one to sell because we don't make a lot, and could be the one, I don't know, hard to say. It's up there for ones I drink the most. Moving on, I'm going to now pour you what we would consider our signature wine, Cabernet Sauvignon. I mentioned earlier that the Alexander Valley is known for Cab. Lots of grapes are grown there, but 70% of all the grapes in the Alexander Valley are Cabernet Sauvignon grapes. So it is definitely the most popular varietal in the region, and it's the wine that we are most known for. Similar to the Pinot, this is a 2019 vintage that I'm holding here. You are probably drinking 2018 if you just moved into the 19 2 weeks ago, so it's probably not in the stores just yet. Distributors move through their inventory. Both finishes very good, and both made. Kevin Hall, winemaker, tries to be very consistent. That's important to us to be very consistent vintage to vintage, so people know what they're getting, even when vintages change. The 18 and 19 is no exception. Very similar in style. He blends the Cabernet. It's usually by 90% Cab. He adds 4 of the varietals to this wine typically, and that's Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Cabernet, and Malbec. The other Bordeaux varietals that I mentioned earlier. A lot of nice dark fruit to this wine. Tannins are very soft. I actually think that that's kind of a general statement when you look at Alexander Valley versus Napa. Napa being known for Cabernets, as you probably know, they can be incredibly big and really firm tannins. And this wine, I think Alexander Valley in general has just softer tannins, and it allows for a wine to be consumed at a young age. It doesn't require to be laid down for many years before you drink it. He does say, 10 to 12 years before this wine peaks. So it's not something that you can lay down. Definitely can, and it will get better with time, but it's also something that you can drink at a young age. So tasting this 19 now, it doesn't seem like a wine that I'm not going to want to drink for another 2 years. It's very good at this moment. So when it does come out and it's in your stores, I encourage you to try the 2019. After the Cabernet, I'm pouring the Merlot. Generally, Merlots get poured before Cabernets because Merlots tend to be softer, but it's not the case for Alexander Valley Vineyards. Our Merlots are very big in style. They're actually a little bit bigger than the Cabernet. A lot of people talk about our Merlots drinking like a Cabernet, and it's true. It's a really big style Merlot. It's going to be something that if you have the tri-tip on your menu, both these wines will go with it great. But Merlot is going to be a nice red wine, a red meat wine. This is the 2018 vintage. That's probably what you have if you have the Merlot. We're right at the tail end of 18. We'll be moving into, actually, we have moved into 19, but the sample, I was able to get a sample of 18 because I don't think the stores, retail stores are on to the 19 just yet. This wine here, the last few vintages, he used to put a little bit of Cabernet Sauvignon in it, but the last few vintages, he's just gone 100% Merlot.
Cheers.
See what I mean? Big. Great food wine. Thanks. All right, 2 more. The next wine is going to be it's a blend. We call it Homestead Red Blend. You can see that. Homestead is a 2-part meaning, one because our property is on the original homestead of the Alexander family. And I didn't mention this earlier, but there's a lot of history on the property, including 3 buildings that Cyrus Alexander built between 1840s, 50s, and 60s. One is an old schoolhouse that we have that's on our property that we've converted into an overnight facility. We use it for accommodating people in the trade. The other is the home that my parents actually live in today, which was Cyrus Alexander's second house that he built on the property. And the first one, his first house is an old adobe brick building that is also on the property that is the oldest building in northern Sonoma County. Further, Cyrus, his wife, and about 30 of their family members are all buried on the property. So a lot of history. So there's the Alexander homestead, and then there's the Wetzel homestead. My family's been there since the early 60s, and it's the place where, when we have big family events, that's where everyone goes and meets up, and you know that better anyway. So anyway, Homestead Red Blend. This is it's actually a newer wine compared to some of these other ones. We've only been making it for about 8 years, and it's quickly grown in popularity to the point where we consider it one of our core items these days. 6 grapes are in this wine. The base of it is Merlot. That's the main varietal there with a good amount of Zinfandel. Combined, they're making up over 70% of the wine. The other grapes that he's using in this blend are Grenache, Syrah, Mourvedre, and Cabernet Sauvignon. Those 4 varietals make up a smaller amount, but and he has changed that few vintages here and there to add different varietals or maybe not add a varietal. However, the last 3 or 4 vintages, that's been the blend that's been sticking with it. It's been doing great for us. Last but not least, we started with the wine that was not in the state wine under a different label. We're going to end with the wine that was not in the state wine under a different label. This is Sinzin. Sinzin's kind of a fun wine. We've been making it since 1978, so it's been around for a real long time. It's not in the state wine because we are buying a lot of this fruit. This is actually a Sonoma County appellation. And the reason why it's Sonoma County and not Alexander Valley is because we put a little bit of Dry Creek fruit into this wine. So you've got mostly Alexander Valley fruit in here, but a little bit of Dry Creek Valley fruit. And Dry Creek Valley is actually, Cabernet is to Alexander Valley as Zinfandel is to Dry Creek Valley. That's the main varietal grown over in the Dry Creek Valley. It's a great place to grow Zin. If you combine Dry Creek with Alexander Valley, then you have to put on the label Sonoma County. So that's why it's Sonoma County wine. 100% Zinfandel. I would describe it as a very classic style Zin in that you get a lot of jamminess up front, some jammy fruit, but it also comes with some pepper spice on the finish. And because of the different label, a lot of people recognize it, but they don't realize who actually makes it. And it is an Alexander Valley Vineyards product, and it is one that we've been making since the late 70s, so it's been around for a long time. And holds a dear place in some of my family members' hearts, like my aunt who named it back in '78. This is a great wine. So that's the lineup, and I just want to thank you all again for listening to me talk about the wines, supporting Zanato's markets, and supporting Alexander Valley Vineyards. And I hope you've enjoyed your dinner and the wines that you picked up to go along with your dinner. So thank you and have a good night.